I, 32M, got arrested for a minor traffic violation, but when the officer realized I was innocent, his apology and how he handled it completely changed my view on law enforcement. I never thought I'd be the guy writing one of these posts, but here I am. Last week, what started as a routine drive home from work turned into one of the most stressful and ultimately eye-opening experiences of my life. It was around 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was driving home after a long day at the office, exhausted and just wanting to get home to my apartment. The traffic was light, and I was cruising down the highway when I noticed flashing lights in my rearview mirror. My heart immediately started racing. I hadn't been speeding, my registration was current, and I hadn't run any lights. I pulled over to the shoulder, turned down my music, and rolled down my window. The officer approached my car with his hand resting on his holster, which immediately set me on edge. "License and registration," he said, not even bothering with a greeting. I reached for my glove compartment to get my registration, explaining what I was doing as I moved. "Officer, may I ask what I did wrong?" "You ran a stop sign back at the intersection of Maple and 5th, he replied curtly. This confused me because I hadn't been anywhere near Maple and 5th. I explained this to him, but he cut me off. "Step out of the vehicle, sir." My confusion turned to alarm. "Officer, there must be some mistake. I haven't been on Maple Street today." I said, "Step out of the vehicle." Now, I complied, my hands shaking slightly as I unbuckled my seatbelt. As soon as I was out of the car, the officer instructed me to put my hands on the hood. Before I knew what was happening, he was patting me down and then, to my complete shock, pulling my arms behind my back and handcuffing me. "You're being detained while we sort this out," he said, his voice cold and professional. "This is ridiculous," I protested, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've got the wrong person." He ignored me and walked me to his patrol car, reading me my rights as we went. I couldn't believe this was happening. I kept trying to explain that there had been a mistake, but he wasn't listening. The ride to the station was silent and tense. My mind was racing with worst-case scenarios. Would this go on my record? Would I need to hire a lawyer? What would my boss say if I missed work because I was in jail? At the station, I was processed like a common criminal, fingerprinted, photographed, and placed in a holding cell. The whole time, I kept insisting there had been a mistake, but no one seemed interested in listening. After what felt like hours, but was probably only about 45 minutes, a different officer came to the cell. This one was older, with graying hair at his temples and crow's feet around his eyes. "We need to talk," he said, his tone much gentler than the first officer's had been. He led me to an interview room and removed my handcuffs. "There's been a misunderstanding," he explained, sitting down across from me. "We've been looking for a vehicle matching the description of yours in connection with a series of traffic violations. The driver ran a stop sign earlier today and nearly caused an accident." I felt a surge of relief. "That wasn't me," I said firmly. "I've been at work all day. You can call my boss to confirm." The officer nodded. "We've already figured that out. The vehicle we're looking for has a similar make and model to yours, but the license plate is different by one digit. Officer Davis misread it in the field." I slumped back in my chair, the tension draining from my body. "So I'm free to go?" "Yes, but before you do, Officer Davis would like to speak with you." My first instinct was to refuse. I was angry and humiliated, but something in the older officer's expression made me pause. "Fine," I said finally. A few minutes later, the officer who had arrested me entered the room. His demeanor had completely changed. Gone was the stern, authoritative figure who had handcuffed me on the side of the road. In his place stood a man who looked genuinely contrite. "I owe you an apology," he began, sitting down beside his colleague. "I made a mistake, and you paid the price for it. That's not acceptable, and I'm truly sorry." I was taken aback by his sincerity. I'd expected a perfunctory apology at best, or perhaps some bureaucratic explanation about protocol. "I should have verified the license plate more carefully," he continued, "and I should have listened when you tried to explain. There's no excuse for how I treated you." I didn't know what to say. Part of me was still angry, but his genuine remorse was disarming. "We understand if you want to file a complaint," the older officer added. "That's your right, and we'll provide you with the necessary forms." I considered it for a moment. "What happens to him if I do?" I asked, nodding toward Officer Davis. "It goes in his record," the older officer explained. "Depending on the outcome of the investigation, there could be disciplinary action." Officer Davis didn't flinch or try to persuade me not to file a complaint. He simply nodded, accepting whatever decision I made. "I made a mistake," he said quietly, "and I'll accept the consequences." His willingness to take responsibility impressed me. It would have been easy for him to become defensive or to hide behind procedure, but he didn't. "I don't want to file a complaint," I decided. "Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is how you handle them afterward." Relief flickered across Officer Davis's face, but he quickly composed himself. "Thank you," he said. but I still want to make this right. What happened next surprised me even more. Officer Davis offered to personally drive me back to my car. On the way, he explained that he'd been a police officer for just under 2 years. He'd grown up in a rough neighborhood and had become a cop because he wanted to make a difference. I've seen how bad policing can tear communities apart, he told me. That's not the kind of officer I want to be. By the time we reached my car, my anger had completely dissipated. As I was about to get out of the patrol car, Officer Davis handed me a card with his name and badge number. If you ever have any issues or questions, or if you change your mind about that complaint, you can reach me directly, he said. I took the card, thanked him, and got into my car. As I drove home, I found myself reflecting on the experience. I'd always had a somewhat neutral view of law enforcement. I respected the difficult job they had to do, but I was also aware of the problems within the system. This experience could have easily reinforced negative stereotypes, but instead, it had humanized the badge for me. Officer Davis had made a mistake, yes, but his willingness to own that mistake, to apologize sincerely, and to make amends had shown me a side of law enforcement I hadn't seen before. It reminded me that behind every uniform is a person trying to do their job the best they can, sometimes under difficult circumstances. I'm not saying one positive experience erases the systemic issues in law enforcement, but it did remind me that change often begins with individuals willing to take responsibility for their actions and committed to doing better. So that's my story. Not the dramatic confrontation some might have expected, but a reminder that sometimes the most powerful moments come not from conflict, but from how we resolve it. Update 1. It's been about a week since the incident, and I wanted to share a surprising development. Yesterday, I received a call from the police department asking if I would be willing to come in and speak with some of their officers in training about my experience. Apparently, Officer Davis had mentioned our interaction to his superiors as an example of how not to handle a traffic stop, and they thought it could be a valuable learning opportunity for new recruits. I was hesitant at first. Reliving the experience wasn't exactly appealing, but I agreed. This morning, I went to the station and spoke to a room of about 15 young officers in training. I shared how it felt to be wrongfully detained, the fear and humiliation I experienced, and how Officer Davis's subsequent actions had changed my perspective. What struck me most was how engaged they were. They asked thoughtful questions about what could have been done differently and how the situation could have been de-escalated earlier. There was no defensiveness, just a genuine desire to learn. After the session, the training officer thanked me and explained that they were trying to incorporate more community perspectives into their training program. We can teach protocol all day long, he said, but hearing directly from citizens about their experiences with law enforcement, both good and bad, that's what really makes an impact. As I was leaving, Officer Davis caught up with me in the parking lot. He thanked me again for not filing a complaint and for being willing to share my story with the trainees. Your mistake turned into a teaching moment, I told him. That's a good thing. He nodded, then hesitated before adding, I've been doing some thinking since that night. I realized I've been approaching this job with too much fear. Fear of making mistakes, fear of not being respected, fear of the dangers out there. And that fear was making me rigid and defensive. I'm working on that now. His self-awareness impressed me. We chatted for a few more minutes before parting ways, and I left feeling oddly hopeful. If more officers were willing to reflect on their actions and learn from their mistakes the way Officer Davis had, maybe real change within law enforcement is possible. I know one interaction doesn't solve the larger issues, but it's a start. And sometimes, that's all we can ask for, a willingness to start somewhere.